I went to London in 1998. Something terrifying happened on the underground. The two faces sitting opposite me in the booth looked up at my curse, staring with quizzical amusement. The first, an extremely attractive looking woman of about 19, smirked as she saw me gazing at my watch. "What's the matter, Billy?" she asked, her voice carrying the thick British accent with which I had become used to the last few weeks. "You gonna turn back into pumpkin at midnight?" Her companion, a guy about the same age, choked slightly on the pint of beer he'd been downing. Dropping it to the wooden table with a clunk, he wiped at his mouth with the sleeve of his jumper still sputtering. For my part, I simply continued to stare at my watch, as if willing the two hands to begin running backward. Finally, I lowered it and stared at the two. "I didn't realize how freaking late it got," I said, my mind beginning to race. The woman, Courtney, gave me a small shrug. "Sir, what's the big deal? This place won't close within another hour, sir." I shook my head. "You don't get it. I promised my folks I'd get my ass back no later than 12:30. This is the first time they've ever let me stay out so late. If I don't get back there, I'm toast." Both of them let out barks of laughter. "What is it with American parents being such bloody killjoys?" Eric asked. I had no answer to give. I simply shook my head as I pulled my wallet out and withdrew a 10-pound note from it. Tossing it down, I slid to my feet, the world tilting slightly from the alcohol in my system. I honestly don't know, man, but I do know I've got to vamoose before I end up screwed. Especially if the three of us still want to hit the movies this weekend. At my words, Courtney jerked her head up to look at me. A sly smile slowly slid across her face, and she leaned over slightly, sliding her hand on top of mine as her blue eyes twinkled. "Then you better get yourself home, haven't you?" she said, her voice taking on a slightly husky tone. "Because your cute ass is going to the pictures with me to see Godzilla, one way or another." I felt my cheeks burn slightly at the flirt, then found my voice. "Yeah, I should. You have the phone number and address I gave you?" She nodded, pulling a folded sheet of paper from her pocket. Satisfied, and with a final exchange of "later," I slung my backpack over my shoulder and headed for the exit. As soon as I stepped outside, I was hit with a torrent of rain. Great, still downpouring. Sighing, I flipped the collar of my leather jacket up and began jogging. It was the summer of 1998, and my parents had decided to take my two younger siblings and I to see out our aunt and uncle in London. It was our first time visiting another country, and to me at least, it felt like visiting a parallel dimension. One where the same language was spoken, but everything else was different. At first, I loved the tours of places like the Tower of London and St. Paul's Cathedral. But I quickly got tired of it, wanting to get out on my own and experience it as only an 18-year-old on the loose could. And after much pleading and promising to behave, I'd finally be given the go-ahead. I was given £50 to spend, along with fare for the trains and buses, and told to have fun. But my mother had begun, her tone deadly serious. "Your father and I expect you to be back here no later than 12:30. You break curfew, and you can forget being let out on your own again. Am I clear?" I'd agreed enthusiastically, promised I would, and in truth, I had fully intended to keep my word. I just hadn't intended on meeting Courtney and Eric in Trafalgar Square. But when I'd locked eyes with the blonde bombshell across the square, sitting on the edge of the fountain in a tight skirt, I couldn't resist. The three of us spent the rest of the day just walking about the city, hitting up stores and eventually ending up at a pub where they delighted in buying me the first ever legal alcohol I'd had. And now, here I am, running about like a chicken with its head cut off, trying to find a way back to Chelsea before I end up dead meat. I shook my head, trying to clear the slightly fuzziness in my vision as I raced towards the bright lights and blaring car horns of Piccadilly Circus. A moment later, I was awash in the neon signs advertising Foster's Beer, Sanyo Electronics, and Coca-Cola. This late at night, the square had emptied out considerably, though a number of people still streamed around, their faces hidden under umbrellas as they pushed past me. My eyes flickered first to a red double-decker bus as it passed by, then a black cab which was letting out the most goth couple I had ever seen. I felt a slight anxiety, even though I knew full well I was legally able to drink. Years of being raised in the States and constantly reminded of what would happen if we were caught drinking before turning 21 gnawed at me. I don't exactly feel comfortable taking a cab tipsy. I don't even know how to get one of the buses to stop. Feeling the anxiety begin to fill me as I again glanced at my watch. I spared a final look around. That's when my eyes fell upon the sign for the underground across from me. As soon as I spied the large red circle with white lettering showing the way, I remembered the ticket in my pocket. Of course, I took it to get here, and since it's an all-day ticket, I can use it until midnight. My mind made up, I stopped to let a jeep pass through the intersection, then jogged across the stairs. As I reached the top, I stopped to spare one final glance around. Despite the time crunch, I smiled, almost feeling truly like an adult for the first time in my life. "See you tomorrow," I whispered to nobody in particular, then hurried down the steps. The sounds of the world above dulled as I entered the hallway, my footsteps echoing off the tile walls. Passing by posters for plays and movies, I followed the winding path until it opened into a large welcome area. As I entered, I was hit by a small wave of surprise. Where the hell is everybody? Even this late at night, and with the amount of activity above, I expected there to at least be a few other people rushing for a train home. But as I stared around the large circular room, I saw no sign of life. The only sound was the soft hum of the fluorescent lights on the walls and columns. I gazed around for a moment longer and began walking, my footfalls again echoing loudly back at me. Fumbling into the pocket of my jeans, I retrieved the crumpled ticket, smoothing it out as best as I could as I approached the gates to the platforms. Oi! The call from behind me made me freeze for a moment, all semblance of thought fleeing. Oh, shit, man. Memories of my mother talking about taking the New York subway as a teenager flooded my mind. Stories about having to watch for armed robbers who'd corner helpless passengers and steal everything from them at knife point. I began to speed walk towards the gate. Stop! I forced myself to turn towards the voice and began to softly laugh, filling with relief at the sight of what had to be a metro cop striding towards me. He appeared to be in his mid-40s, strands of brown hair peeking from under his cap. I shot a look at the name stamped into his vest. D. Giddens. As he approached, he caught sight of the look on my face, and the hardened expression he wore softened as he raised his hands. My apologies. I startled you. Still chuckling, I nodded, swallowing before answering. Honestly, yeah. You did, officer. I didn't see anyone else down here when I entered. I gave a strained smile. Kinda scared the hell out of me. He let out a chuckle of his own as he finished making his way over to me and flashed a smile. You're an American tourist, aren't you? I nodded again. Yes, sir. Turning, he pointed at the clock hanging from the ceiling. Well, you might not know it, lad, but the station closes in about 20 minutes. The underground doesn't run after midnight or so. A small spike of worry rose at his words. Crap. It doesn't? I asked. He shook his head, rubbing his beard as he looked at me. Where are you needing to go? I need to get back to Chelsea. I took a train from Sloane Square, but that was a different line than this, I think. At my words, a pleased look crossed the officer's face. You might actually mean Locke, he said, pointing at the signs over the escalators heading farther down. The Piccadilly line doesn't stop at Sloane, but it does stop at South Kensington. roughly a 10-minute walk from Chelsea. The last train for the Bakerloo line is already gone, but there's one final westbound train for Piccadilly due in 10 minutes. If you hurry down, you should make it. Just follow the signs. I gave a sigh of relief and nodded, this time giving the cop a genuine smile. Thank you! Thank you so much, sir! He nodded, then motioned for me to hurry. Giving him one final look, I turned and stepped up to the gate, sliding my ticket into the slot. It spatted back out, and I quickly slid through and jogged to the escalator. Stepping onto it, I leaned against the railing and closed my eyes. The rhythmic metalling clang filled my ears as I descended. Opening them as I felt it level out, I stepped off and hurried down the corridor. There were 3 hallways that branched off the main one. The one to the right was already barred off by a gate, the same with the left branch of a fork straight ahead, which left only one choice. Well, guess I'm going this way. Taking the hallway to the right, I turned left and descended a set of steps. A moment later, I stepped out onto an empty train platform. I felt another wave of confusion. The sign at the top of the stairs said this was the Bakerloo platforms, but the cops said to follow the signs for the Piccadilly line. Where the hell am I supposed to go? The answer came as I turned to the left, spying the sign which pointed into yet another hallway. Ah, I muttered, feeling a bit sheepish. I started towards it, feeling a bit sure that I would make it back in time to my aunt and uncle's house on Burnsall Saint. Scrape. I stopped, almost mid-step as the sound came. It echoed off the tiled walls of the station for a moment, then died away. For a moment, I simply stared ahead, waiting to see if anyone would emerge. Nothing moved in the stillness. Come on, dude, you gotta get to the other platform before the train arrives. I began to move forward again, my boots clapping on the floor. Scrape. This time, I froze like a statue. The first time this sound had come, I couldn't figure out exactly where it originated. The echo had been distorted, but this time, it had been much clearer. It had come from ahead, seemingly where the empty platform disappeared around a bend. I felt my pulse quicken slightly and swallowed. For a moment, I contemplated saying nothing. Then I spoke. Hello? My voice echoed off the walls, bouncing back as it died away. Why the hell did you just do that? Haven't you seen enough horror movies? But I shook my head, pushing the thought away. This is real life, not a horror movie. For a moment, I continued to stand there, waiting. Nobody answered my call. A mental image of the cop flashed through my mind. Maybe he came down a set of stairs for employees, making sure I'm not going to spray paint the walls or anything. The thought made me call out again. Officer? That you? Again, my voice echoed away into the emptiness, dying away and answered by no one. As I stared, a feeling suddenly fell over me. One that, alone on the platform, was not pleasant in the least. The feeling of being watched. I felt my pulse begin to quicken as it grew, shooting a look over my shoulder to make sure I wasn't being snuck upon. But nobody emerged from the hall behind me. I swung my gaze back, feeling a mixture of wariness and trepidation. And then a sudden loud noise caused me to jump, my heart almost stopping as a booming man's voice shattered the silence. Attention! The final westbound Piccadilly line train will arrive at the station in 3 minutes. I repeat, the final westbound Piccadilly train will arrive in 3 minutes. The sound of the intercom clicked off, and I let out a low, soft laugh as the realization hit me, bending over and putting my hands on my knees. Freaking hell, man! After a moment, I stood back up straight and headed for the hall. As I reached it, I spared one final look down the hall. That noise had to be a fucking rat or something. You are getting way too jumpy, Billy. Shaking my head, I entered the hallway, quickly descending a final set of stairs.